Welcome back to the Hippie Martha Hormone Hour. I'm Ashley, your host, and today we're wrapping up our miscarriage series with something that brings both understanding and a little hope. We're exploring one possible why behind certain losses, known as a luteal phase deficiency, essentially when progesterone isn't functioning the way we need it to. Last month was Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and this episode is the final installment in that series. Before we begin, I want to gently offer a trigger warning. I'll be speaking openly about pregnancy loss and using clinical terms like bleeding along with several reproductive hormones. If today isn't the right day for this conversation, please honor yourself and pause here. This episode will be waiting whenever you feel ready. If you are here to understand more and feel empowered with knowledge, keep listening. My goal today is to help you see another piece of the puzzle so you can better support your body, whether you're trying to conceive or simply want a healthier, more balanced cycle. We're diving into one of the most overlooked contributors to PMS, infertility, miscarriage, and even burnout in women. Luteal phase deficiency, or low progesterone function, is just that. I get this question all the time. And often it's, should I take progesterone if my progesterone levels are low and I keep having recurrent losses? So we're going to talk about that. But before your eyes glaze over with the word deficiency and hormone talk, let me say this. If you crash emotionally or physically before your period, if you spot for days before full bleeding, if you feel unlike yourself the week before your cycle, or if you've ever been diagnosed with PMDD, then this episode is absolutely for you. So we're going to get right into talking about what exactly is luteal phase deficiency. Our cycle has two different phases. We have our follicular phase, which begins with cycle day 1 of menstruation, leading up to ovulation and then the day of ovulation. After ovulation occurs, we then enter our luteal phase. And this is where progesterone is predominantly the highest within the cycle. Progesterone isn't usually made within the follicular phase, maybe little pulses here and there, but typically in the follicular phase, that is when estrogen is dominant and at its highest. Hormones in the follicular phase. Other hormones in the follicular phase include FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, LH, which is luteinizing hormone, and testosterone, which usually spikes right around ovulation. And then, of course, there's estrogen. Estrogen plays a role in building up the uterine lining, in producing cervical fluid, and it can also give us kind of that more energy, more outgoing behavior. But in some people, not always. And we'll talk about that maybe another time. Today, we're focusing on that luteal phase. And what that luteal phase is, it's the time when you may want to get things done, and you maybe feel like you're kind of going into that wintering mode, or when you are kind of in that nesting mode. And this is primarily due to high levels of progesterone. But if we have a luteal phase deficiency, oftentimes we just don't feel as well in the luteal phase. And I will talk about that in just a minute. So the luteal phase is the time after ovulation before your next period. And during this time, your body should be producing healthy amounts of progesterone. Progesterone is a hormone that overall warms the body, reduces headaches and migraines, repairs the uterine lining for potential pregnancy, reduces spotting and supports luteal phase length, supports brain function, and often has a calming effect, supports breast health. It does decrease libido, but it also has an anti-androgenic effect, meaning it reduces extra hormones that we don't need during that phase of our cycle. And it can often tend to slow gastric motility. And we know that when we have healthy amounts of progesterone, we are supporting early pregnancy and implantation. We are keeping our moods stable. We are supporting our thyroid, sleep, and metabolism. And we often, when progesterone is at normal levels, we feel calm, grounded, and connected to our own bodies. So when we have luteal phase deficiencies and progesterone is too low, or progesterone is okay, but we have an excess of estrogen in comparison, that is when we might feel off. And so it's not always simply you don't make enough progesterone. Sometimes it's okay, estrogen is overpowering that. And how to spot this is by using clues from your cycle chart or by mapping out your cycle. And if you've listened to any of my other podcasts, you know how important it is to map out your cycles or to chart your cycles. And by charting your cycles, I'm meaning you are paying attention to your body. You are charting your basal body temperature every morning. You are looking at cervical fluid throughout the day. You are looking at signs or symptoms that are popping up throughout your whole cycle, and you are looking at those patterns and seeing, where am I noticing these symptoms occurring within my cycle? So that is what cycle mapping is, and I really encourage you to learn the skill. For instance, when you come to me and you are like, I just don't feel good, I have all these things going on, one of the first things I'm going to probably suggest you do is start charting your cycles and start paying attention. I never assume a luteal phase deficiency just from one sign. It usually has a pattern. And instead of spending so much money on labs and testing and trying to get your healthcare provider to figure out what's going on, I am here to tell you that you can do this all by charting your cycles. Using that symptothermal fertility awareness method, there are so many clues that we can find on your charts together. Here are some luteal phase clues that might give you an insight that maybe your luteal phase just isn't as strong or your progesterone isn't as strong as it should be. The first one is that your luteal phase is consistently shorter than 12 days. So after you confirm ovulation until cycle day 1, when you notice bright red blood for your period, that is going to be your count. We also know that if the luteal phase is getting shorter over time without explanation, this is another clue. So if you start out at having a luteal phase length of maybe 16 days, and then the next month it goes down to 14 days, and then the next month it goes down to 12 days, you're getting shorter over time. And maybe you haven't changed anything, but you're noticing something is going on and something is different, and your cycles are changing in length. We also can notice that luteal length is bouncing around month to month, where there's no consistency. This is very off. Your luteal phase should be very consistent and often doesn't change. Unlike the follicular phase. The follicular phase can vary greatly, but the luteal phase is pretty sturdy. And when we notice that bouncing around month to month, that is a big clue, a big red flag that there is something more going on with your progesterone. Other clues in temperatures, if you're charting a basal body temperature, can be delayed temp shifts after ovulation, slow stair-stepping rise, weak rise overall, meaning you don't have that big jump from low temps to high temps for ovulation. And sometimes temps often tend to dip down or go up and down during the luteal phase and go above and below the cover line. As far as cervical fluid clues go, most of the time, people who have an imbalance in estrogen and progesterone will notice that their cervical fluid stays moist or wet instead of drying up post-ovulation. Some people might also notice fertile fluid appearing again in the luteal phase. And remember that if you have ever taken any of my classes or listened to me talk, cervical fluid is driven by estrogen. And so if we have too much estrogen, we're going to have a lot of cervical fluid. Some other cues to kind of hone in on is charting your symptoms. Are you having a lot of PMS, anger, rage, maybe PMDD even, where you are just outraged and it's 10 times worse than what normal PMS symptoms would be? spotting for multiple days before your period, and this could be like brown spotting, usually that is a sign that you, one, have low progesterone, and two, have kind of a weak constitution in your womb. Medicine, they called it, or in Chinese medicine, they call it a cold womb. And cold wombs don't have a lot of energy, they don't have a lot of blood flow, and sometimes the blood from your last period still lingers in the endometrium. And so that's where that spotting for multiple days can come from. You might also notice right at the end of your cycle that you have major temp drops before the bleeding starts. And that can also trigger a lot of headaches and migraines during that time. So that could be a cue that your progesterone might just not be as strong as it should be. And if you're thinking, that's me, stay with me, because now we're getting into the why, okay? So why luteal phase deficiency happens. Here's the 5 main root causes. And remember, there is no one size fits all. Depending on your history and lifestyle, luteal phase deficiency can be caused by numerous things. But here are the top 5. The one is what we call in the fertility awareness world, deficient. You have low estrogen and low progesterone. These are bodies that are running on complete E, okay? Your tank is completely depleted, you're underfed, overworked, high stress, and this is not good. Your adrenals are typically signs of people who have deficient include those with low or patchy cervical fluid, long or inconsistent cycles, late bleeding, fatigue, gut issues, low libido. You might be underweight, chronically stressed, maybe following a vegan or low-fat diet, or overexercise. I see this in people who are training a lot for maybe a marathon, or you're training for something and you're doing a lot of exercise, but maybe you're not getting enough caloric intake for the exercise that you're doing. So what can help with these things? Number one is for those, especially those who are maybe underweight or over-exercising, and it doesn't have to be intentional, okay? This can just be like you're really wanting to train for this really big race. It could just mean that your body is just telling you what you need more of. And so eating more fats, proteins, and minerals in your diet can really help that. Increasing a caloric intake of even just a couple hundred calories, especially throughout that luteal phase, can really make a big difference in supporting that cycle. Reducing the amount of intense exercise, especially maybe around the luteal phase, late luteal phase into the menstrual phase, can help as well. Maybe, instead of, running 10 miles, you're running 5 miles. Maybe instead of doing like heavy, intense cardio, you're backing off and you're doing some more weightlifting, slowing it down, and really just being intentional with how you're moving your body. Other things include supporting your gut healing, adding herbs, therapy, rest, and sometimes even considering a cholesterol check, Dutch testing for cortisol levels, and kind of seeing where your hormones are if, we can't see something on your cycle charts. And if we're needing more testing, that might be more of where you look. The second is high estrogen dominance. In this instance, your progesterone might be fine, but estrogen is too high and your body is not clearing the estrogen well. Some signs of this include heavy, painful periods, long fertile mucus phases, diagnosed with PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, or cysts, and you might notice really strong PMS symptoms. So to support this, we usually start with the basics. 1, removing xenoestrogens, including plastics, fragrances, birth control residue, what you're drinking. We're removing all those exogenous exposures to estrogen, and we're trying to do gentle detox habits. This includes sweating, fiber, increasing your cruciferous vegetables, hydration. And by hydration, it's not drinking like gallons and gallons of water. It's really making sure that those cells are hydrated with minerals and salts so that our body can really consume that water and that hydration and take it in. We can also do supporting herbs for supporting progesterone during this time, because typically those who have estrogen dominance, actually their progesterone levels are quite well. It's just the estrogen kind of overtakes that. And then the last big thing is supporting the liver and gut. I cannot say this enough. It is so important, whether that's castor oil packs, making sure you are pooping daily. If that's not happening, that is the first place that you need to start if you are dealing with these things. And so super, super important. All right, the next factor is premature progesterone drop. Now, these are people who do make enough progesterone, but they tend to lose it early. And so you'll see maybe normal temps and normal cervical fluid, especially early in the luteal phase, but PMS, spotting, mood changes, all are occurring right before bleeding. And often high stress, fast-paced women will get this. So if you are just going, and you might be so used to the daily stressors that you have, your body finally just says, I'm done. I can't take it. When we have high stress, our cortisol levels rise, which causes imbalanced blood sugars. It causes stress on the liver. It can cause fatigue in our adrenals. And it really is just a big red flag that you need to slow down. So here's my prescription, and it's written down. This is exactly what I wrote. Your prescription is to slow the hell down. Okay. I know it can be hard. I was this person. I still am this person sometimes. And if you haven't listened to the burnout podcast that I did with Valentina Thayer, go back and listen to that podcast, because we talk about burnout and we talk about how it can just wreck our cycles, and it can wreck our overall health, our mental health, our physical health. So especially if you are going into perimenopause, this is the time to back off, because your body needs the break. So when we're slowing down, we're reducing our output. We're getting to bed early. We're supporting our nervous system. We're supporting our emotional regulation. And actually, I have another podcast that will be coming out soon about working on somatic therapy in our body and supporting that overall nervous system. Another way is getting acupuncture. Acupuncture, you've heard me talk about it numerous times. I work at an acupuncture clinic. I am not an acupuncturist. I do a lot of education there, but I have seen acupuncture help so much on a cycle chart and really reduce stress, focus on just rebalancing the body. So it's super, super helpful. Okay, the fourth is thyroid and adrenal exhaustion. So this is where progesterone is unable to stay stable. We often notice when your thyroid labs are kind of like borderline, whether they're low or extremely high. Sometimes they can fatigue out, so they go low and then they go high and then they are like done. And so when this occurs, we see this on a chart. And so I might indicate, if I'm working with you, if I see low basal body temperatures overall over a period of time, if you're gaining weight, if you have depression, hair loss, fatigue, coldness in your hands and feet, or very inconsistent cycles where you're having like weird anovulatory cycles, this is a time to really dive into what is going on. And this kind of goes with our last one. Like if you're burning out, this is the next thing to come. And you've heard me talk about the river, right? The upstream effects of our hormones. And our sex hormones are last to be discovered and are last to kind of give up and show signs. So we're kind of working our way up the river here. And we're looking at thyroid, we're looking at our gut, we're looking at our liver. And so all of these things we can tell on our cycle charts. This is where, if you're working with me, I'm going to refer you to make sure that you are getting your thyroid tested. We're testing like a full panel of thyroid. That means TSH, free T3, T4, reverse T3. We're testing antibodies. We're making sure that we are supporting these systems so that these systems can then support your HPO axis, which is your ovulatory axis and your hormones in your body. We're working downstream or upstream rather, and we are supporting your overall body, and this will help then kind of downstream affect your cycles and get them back to where they need to be. The last is pituitary communication signaling. And this is where sometimes it's called progesterone receptor resistance, meaning the body makes progesterone, but the message just is not landing. Signs of this include split peaks in fertility, and ovulation or odd ovulation patterns, short or super long follicular phases. Sometimes you can get this, especially during the postpartum phase, where your brain is controlled by lactation hormones, but it wants to be on the HPO axis, which is that cycle axis. Like it wants to have a period, but your lactational hormones are kind of overpowering that system. And so it's like this back and forth tug, almost like a tug of war, right? Like, okay, I just nursed. My body can't make a baby right now. But then maybe you start nursing in longer periods and your body's like, I'm going longer periods. We feel safe enough to ovulate and to have a period. And so it'll throw out an egg really fast and you'll ovulate and then you'll have a period, but then you might not have a period for another 6 months postpartum. So this is kind of the pituitary communication system. Another phase is in the teen years and in perimenopause. Basically, this can cause emotionally unstableness around hormonal transitions where you just have a really hard time, whether that's with ovulation, whether that's with PMS or PMDD, during your cycle, during your period. Things to support this phase could be acupuncture, reproductive organ massage like Arvigo therapy, Vitex, which is an herb, but this is only to be used with guidance from an herbalist because Vitex can be really good sometimes and sometimes it can't. I actually did another podcast with Tamara and we talked about Vitex a lot, so you can go back and listen to that episode. And then there's always just getting back into cycle syncing movement in nature practices. And this can kind of help with those transitions. I know it sounds silly and people just are like, what can I take? What can I do? Like, is this going to help? And in all reality, when kind of go back to the basics, really, that's all we need sometimes. And so that can be really hard for people though. If you're not sure which category you fall into yet, here are some universal supports that help 80% of my patients. One is protect your sleep. Make sure you're getting good sleep. You're getting to bed early. You have a dark, cool room. You're setting that sleep sanctuary. You are not scrolling in bed. You're not getting that artificial blue light right before bedtime. You don't have like heating pads or heating blankets. Your room is kind of nice and cool and you can be snuggled under the blankets, but really you want to protect that sleep. Get to bed early. The better. It's a lot easier in the winter time because obviously it gets darker a lot sooner. The next is getting morning sunlight. And there's so much research about letting the sunlight hit the eyeballs. And the reason I say eyeballs is if you have contacts or glasses, make sure you're not wearing them when you're getting morning sunlight. And what that morning sunlight does is gets into your brain, it stimulates your circadian rhythm, And our cycle and our circadian rhythm are very closely linked. And so when you're getting that morning sunlight, it's turning on the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, and it's helping to really just kind of turn things on and get things working again. Eating enough good fats, not in excess, but good fats can help with progesterone. And that's because progesterone is a fatty hormone. It's made from cholesterol. And if we are restricting the amount of fats that we get, sometimes our cholesterol can drop, and if there's not enough fats in our body to make that extra progesterone. Taking B vitamins, especially methylated B6, can help in the luteal phase. Remember, supporting that liver and gut is very helpful. We also have research that states that using vitamin E and C during the follicular phase, as well as magnesium and evening primrose oil, which also has a little bit of those omegas in it, can improve the actual corpus luteum that is involved in egg development. And so especially when you are trying to conceive, or you're noticing that you're having multiple miscarriages and you have a luteal phase defect, what we really want to focus on is supporting the egg development, because our corpus luteum that is produced from the outer shell of the egg that is released at ovulation, that corpus luteum provides us all of the progesterone we need for our luteal phase. Our adrenals provide a little bit of progesterone, but if we're stressed to the max, they're not going to release progesterone. And I also want to note that progesterone goes in like pulses, okay? So it's not just like, constant throughout that whole luteal phase, but that little yellow body of the corpus luteum, and you can look it up. I teach about it in all of my courses, but that little yellow body really is the driving factor of keeping that pregnancy. And it also helps to sustain a pregnancy if you do get pregnant, because that is what's going to get you through that 13-week phase of pregnancy until the placenta can actually be formed and produce the rest of the progesterone that the body needs for the rest of the pregnancy. So as you can see or hear, if we don't have enough progesterone that our body is making and we're trying to get pregnant and our corpus luteum is running out of progesterone early, it's not going to sustain a pregnancy. And so hormones are going to drop and we're going to miscarry. And that is where, leading back to the fact that, well, why don't I just go on a progesterone supplement? That we can't just supplement. And actually, there's a lot of research that states that oral progesterone supplements aren't super effective in keeping that progesterone for that pregnancy. Now, some people swear by it. I will say that a topical progesterone is not going to do hardly anything. They have done numerous studies, and research shows that topical progesterone does not do anything. Oral progesterone has had a slight increase in reduction of miscarriage happening, especially if you know you are luteal phase deficient. But the highest rating is by working on that egg cellular health in the follicular phase, in working on your stress management, your sleep, addressing your adrenals. All of that can really help with supporting that luteal phase more so than just taking an oral progesterone. Other healing modalities that you can use include just adding carrots, leafy greens, and root vegetables to your diet, especially in the luteal phase. Trying maybe adaptogens or adrenal tonics to kind of help support and replenish the body, and getting acupuncture. A lot of women come in to get acupuncture to help not only reduce stress, but to support ovulation and really just keep the body in balance from a Chinese medicine perspective. So like I said, when we understand what is going on with progesterone, we know how to support it. As we wrap up today, I hope that you're leaving with a deeper understanding of how powerful the luteal phase actually is. And to note that, one, it's not just for conception, but is extremely important if you are trying to conceive. It is also for your overall emotional, hormonal, and physical well-being. Luteal phase deficiency is not a broken body, it's a communication issue. It is a messenger, and it can really help you to understand and identify needs that your body might have. If any part of this episode sounded familiar, if you've heard your own symptoms, your own story, or your own questions in what we talked through today, please know that you don't have to figure this out alone. This isn't something you can just Google your way through. It's not something that is a one-size-fits-all solution. Your hormones, your history, and your body deserve individualized care. This is exactly the work I do with clients every day. I help women understand their cycles, identify where things are breaking down, and create a plan that supports their body in a real sustainable way, whether the goal is conception, symptom relief, or just feeling like yourself again. And if you've had multiple miscarriages along the way, this might be an introduction into why they may be occurring. If you're wanting deeper guidance, or you're ready for someone to walk alongside with you through this, I'd love to support you. You can book a one-on-one consult with me through my link in my bio or on my website. And together we can bring clarity, confidence, and compassion back to your cycle. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again for listening, and thank you for honoring your body today. I'll see you in the next episode.